I've heard you say in podcasts that you were expecting to be designated a foreign agent, but perhaps the reality is different. How does it feel now?
This is not something that one expects. It's not a birthday present or a New Year celebration. And frankly, I don't think the public would be very much interested in my interior emotions. But given the tempo of this list being filled with new and new names every Friday, and these names all being familiar people, and especially when one saw the broadening circle of, I would say, social strata included into this foreign agents registry. First, it was mostly NGO activists, especially those who dealt with election observation, then journalists, then came academicians, teachers, even one painter, and video bloggers. And then it became more or less evident that my turn would come one Friday or the other. By the way, I would like to note that last Friday, for some reason, went without the usual news from the Ministry of Justice, so no new foreign agents. Evidently, they went on their May vacations already. But we will expect them back with more news and more expected presence next Friday, I suppose.
You know, those that are familiar with your work and your podcasts know you're punchy, but I think they see you also as a voice of calm amid great uncertainty. And I've noticed a consistent thread in your comments was that you felt like you needed to be in Moscow to make your point, to spread your word and to send the message and to get through to the people that needed to hear you. How does being outside of Moscow change that and perhaps how you send your message? And do you still feel like your place is in Moscow and in Russia, if not perhaps this Russia?
When I was back in my country, I was a rather persistent opponent to immigration. It has always been my position that while staying in your place and doing your job is physically possible, it's better to use this opportunity while it lasts. And maybe I can say for myself that I used it while it was possible till maybe the very last moment. You know that after February 24th, many people left immediately. More people left within a few weeks. I will not say that it's a particular badge of honor for me to have stayed a few weeks longer than the others, but still, while there was no direct threat of, let's say, frankly, criminal prosecution, then of course we who are public speakers and teachers and scholars, we try to stay where we belong. One can't avoid feeling that a word spoken from outside of the country is fraught with much less risk, and therefore it's much less valuable. You get freedom of speech, but this speech loses its about half of its consequence. But on the other hand, those who stay are more and more forced to be completely silent or to speak of non-political subjects. And I'm a political scientist. You have designated me a Kremlin critic. I don't think my main job was to criticize the Kremlin. I study legislative process and parliamentarism, and this is what I taught to my students while I had the opportunity of teaching. This is what I wrote about, and I was very much in the Duma in the Russian parliament during the last, 20 years. So I can't say that I'm a radical oppositional figure. And maybe my experience tells something about the transformation that Russian political sphere and public sphere in general has undergone in those very few last weeks.
You know, you could make the argument too that you may be slightly safer somewhere else, but as history, I think, has proved, you're still not perfectly safe being outside of Moscow and Russia, even if you're around the world. You know, I think what I'd love to get your take on is the informational war that's taking place. And you said at the beginning of this interview, no one's interested in your emotional response. But actually, I think we are, as non-Russians watching this, interested in Russian people's response to what we're seeing. And whether in some ways, and I think it's human nature, it's perhaps easier to believe a lie than it is to accept the truth. Do you think there's some element of that in Russian people's acknowledgement or understanding of what we're seeing today, and will that change? What changes that, whether it's Putin's behavior or what we see in this war?
Well, since the February 24th, the situation we found ourselves in was so, to put it mildly, uncomfortable, unbearable, that I can understand the temptation to accept any version, however primitive, any version that would offer you a vestige of comfort, any picture, even taken from state TV, that will still make you believe that you are a good person living in a good place, that you are comparatively safe, that the world has not broken into pieces. I can perfectly understand the temptation. I feel it myself. So especially in recent weeks and days, I have been judging much more mildly those people who support the official version of events, because truth is hardly bearable. The catastrophe is too palpable to, at the same time, it's palpable and it's impossible to look it fully in the face. I'm a scholar. It's my duty to study political reality, and I find it hard to even read the news, to say nothing of analyzing them. So again, when you hear and see people who say it's a special military operation, it's for our own good, we had no other choice, we're fighting the Nazis, etc., keep in mind that possibly in their hearts there's this daily, hourly fear and anxiety and horror and general impossibility to adapt to this reality. It's like nothing we have experienced before. It's not like 2014. It's not like 2008. It's a whole new reality, and it's extremely hard to come to terms with. Time must, well, we do hope time will do something at adapting. We human creatures tend to adapt to almost anything that happens. But now we are in what we may call an acute phase of what is happening. No signs of hostilities abating, no light in the end of any tunnel that you can possibly look into.
I guess the question is, when does that perhaps turn inward and turn on Putin? But Ekaterina, I'm out of time. Please come back on the show. We had some technical issues in the beginning, or I would have had more time with you, but I look forward to continuing this conversation. Thank you for your time and your wisdom.